do not make sense. Like why there's so few believers on the firing line, while so many others sit the fence. But if you want to know where the Word of God stands, and believe it wants to use your feet and hands, it's time to take your faith out of the seats and into the streets, and come along with me. If you only look, then you will see on WCN-TV.
Hey, good Wednesday afternoon. Man, have I been looking forward to this show. And we have a great one planned for you. We have a guest who is going to be able to talk to us from the perspective of deep experience with actually being on the front lines, treating people who have COVID. And no, we're not talking about some kind of fruitcake left-wing progressive politician, communist politician, Democrat. We're talking about a truly compassionate doctor who has extensive experience in medicine and especially in treating COVID this year. So we're going to be talking with her in a few minutes. But before we get to that, I want to talk a little bit with you. I want to thank Rob Pugh. My name's Mike Heath, and this is kind of Rob's show, but he's asked me to sort of split responsibilities with him. So I'm now doing 2 shows per month. So we do a show every week. So Rob's going to be doing a couple shows a month, and I'm going to be doing 2 shows a month. And I want to tell you who the guests are going to be. He just emailed me, in fact, 5 minutes ago, just before the show, so you can think about what's coming up here. We got Dr. Karladine Graves on today. She's with us, and she's good to go. In a moment here, I'll introduce her. And then next week, we have Rob's going to be talking with Doug Hagman. Doug Hagman, you don't want to miss that one. Doug was one of the earliest alternative media investigators. He's a registered, licensed private investigator, very honest, good, decent man. And he dug in on 9/11 back after that happened, and the internet got up and started going, and he was unafraid of controversy, and he's built a very large and loyal audience. So he's going to be coming on to talk with Rob. And then the following week, it's a very good friend of mine is going to be on. I'll be interviewing Brian Kamaker from Mass Resistance. If you've never met or heard or read Brian Kamaker's work, he's been at it for nearly 4 decades now. You want to see that interview and share it with friends, because Brian is brilliant and very courageous. The week after that, Shahram Hadian, I think I pronounced that right. I interviewed him about a month ago. He's coming back for another visit. We're going to talk about Islam. And then David Zuniga, we're going to be interviewing him. I'm going to be interviewing him. Just found out about that just before the show. So I haven't met him yet, but I can't wait to meet him on the show. And then we'll be into December, and we don't have those guests lined up just yet. So WCN-TV. Jared, would you bring that up? WCN-TV.net. And Dr. Graves, hold on. I'm going to be coming to you before you know it. But I want to talk for a minute about this platform. This has been out there for about a year, WCN-TV. This is like YouTube. You need to think of it as YouTube. But you know what, folks? If it's on here, it's not going to disappear. This platform is owned and operated by Rob, and so the bits and data we own. It's not on a cloud somewhere. It's not on Amazon's cloud. It's not on Microsoft's cloud. It's not on Google's cloud. We actually have the bits, the data, the videos right here in the building where I'm talking to you from. And we serve those bits, those videos through to you, directly to you, if you want to watch them. So there's no intermediary. There's no Facebook. There's no YouTube. There's nobody in the middle that can interfere with us on this platform. And then, Jared, open up the next link there. It says Mykovitz as an example. So this video was on YouTube. I think it was not that one. It's on my notes. If you go back to my notes, my email, it's labeled Mykovitz example. Sorry about this, folks. We're learning how to, me and my son producer, Jared's his name, learning how to work. There you go. So I want you to look at this number down here. Now, I know it's not 8 million, but Jared, just highlight that number down there. That's 8,101 views for this video, which was taken down off of YouTube and Facebook probably. It was when COVID started and the globalists started to lose their grip on the narrative, this video was attacked and was deleted and was taken away. You were denied the opportunity to learn this information. We're going to start playing this just for a minute, and then I'm going to bring Dr. Karladine Graves in to introduce herself and to tell us about the woman who's being interviewed here. Judy Mykovitz, who I learned just before the show, is a very good friend of Dr. Karladine Graves. So we're going to learn a little bit about Dr. Judy Mykovitz, who you need to know about. I'm telling you, if you haven't heard of Judy Mykovitz and you haven't looked into her story, this woman was sent to jail for crossing Tony Fauci. I'm going to repeat that. She was sent to jail for crossing Tony Fauci. She's a good, solid scientist and Christian woman. She was sent to jail by that. Let's just watch the video here. Can you make it full screen for us, Jared, and start it right from the beginning? We're only going to play a few minutes here because I don't want to eat too much into Dr. Graves' time, because Dr. Graves is going to talk to us about COVID. We're all scared to death of COVID, right? We're all scared. I even see people at Trump rallies all masked up, and at least they're not 6 foot distancing. I'm really proud of them for that. They're crowding them in there. 30,000 of them yesterday, I think it was, who showed up for Trump. So here we go. This is a little bit about Judy Mykovitz, and then we're going to bring Karladine Graves in, Dr. Graves, and we're going to learn about COVID, and we're going to learn why you shouldn't be scared. We're all going to die, and this turns out is pretty much like a flu, maybe a strong flu, but Dr. Graves is going to give you all you need to know about this thing, and then you don't have to be scared anymore. Go ahead.
Dr. Judy Mykovitz has been called one of the most accomplished scientists of her generation. Her 1991 doctoral thesis revolutionized the treatment of HIV/AIDS. At the height of her career, Dr. Mykovitz published a blockbuster article in the journal Science. The controversial article sent shockwaves through the scientific community as it revealed that the common use of animal and human fetal tissues were unleashing devastating plagues of chronic diseases. For exposing their deadly secrets, the minions of Big Pharma waged war on Dr. Mykovitz, destroying her good name, career, and personal life. Now, as the fate of nations hang in the balance, Dr. Mykovitz is naming names of those behind the plague of corruption that places all human life in danger. So you made a discovery that conflicted with the agreed-upon narrative.
Correct.
And for that, they did everything in their powers to destroy your life.
Correct.
You were arrested.
Correct.
And then you were put under a gag order.
For 5 years, if I went on social media, if I said anything at all, they would find new evidence and put me back in jail. And it was one of the few times I cried, and it was because I knew there was no evidence the first time. And when you can unleash that kind of force to force someone into bankruptcy with a perfect credit score, and so that I couldn't bring my 97 witnesses, which...
Listen, You need to go watch that video. It's about 29 minutes long, and then there's a lot of other minutes that just start Googling around Judy Mykovitz, and you're going to find, not on YouTube, of course, not on fake book, not Facebook, fake book. No, you won't find it there, but you'll find it on independent platforms like this. It's all around the globe. They can't suppress it. They can't suppress. I'm telling you something, folks. Logos is rising. Truth is rising. Dr. Karladine Graves, thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule to be with us on WCN-TV Live. I'm sure truth is rising, isn't it, Doctor?
Absolutely. What does the word say? Jesus says, I am the truth, and the truth will set you free. And that is the only freedom that we have, is in him and in his truth. And that's what we need to do. I really appreciated your theme song as you came in, because it's, we can't sit on the fence. We can't sit in the pews. It's time to get up. It's time to move. It's time to be what Jesus called us to be, and that is the light and the salt of the earth. And that's where each and every one of us who proclaim his name should be. And that's where Judy Mykovitz is, because Judy is a true Christian. And as she was talking just now, I want your listeners to really pay attention to something, and that's history. And everybody's eyes glaze over when you talk about history. But history serves as a foundation for us. And it was in Nazi Germany that the scientists and the physicians were told what to believe, how to believe it, and then how to administer it. And I want you to know that we are repeating ourselves right here in America now and around the world with the same type of thinking, because over 50% of physicians are owned now by a hospital, an insurance company, big pharma, or big business. And they are told what to actually tell their patients. They are told how to practice medicine. And if they don't, they lose their position and they lose their salaries. And
now,
so,
Dr. Graves, when you bring up Hitler, right? When you bring up Germany, we think of the most evil man that could ever have been existed on planet Earth, Adolf Hitler. And what you're saying, and we think, well, surely not here, right? We don't have an Adolf Hitler. I mean, if there is an Adolf Hitler, if you ask a Democrat, they'd tell you it's Donald Trump, right? But that you're right, aren't you? It isn't a Hitler that's doing it, but it's coming from the way America has grown up in terms of corporate protections for corporations, that sort of thing. Expand on that.
well, you have to remember that Hitler actually required that the Jewish race be called non-human. And if they were not human, therefore they could be experimented on and they could be exterminated, because
Kind
they
of like
were
abortion. Kind of like abortion, right?
just like abortion. And we have allowed it. I keep saying time and time again, of course, this hasn't a lot to do with COVID, I understand. And this interview is to be on COVID. But where was the church when we took prayer out of the school? What churches stood up and said, wait a minute, what's going on here? Let's question this. What happened when we passed abortion? Where was the church? Which Christians stood up? I mean, to fight that at the root of the cause.
Yes.
Where was the church when we said homosexual marriage is going to be allowed throughout our land? Where was the church? Where were we? And I know I personally have had to ask God for forgiveness that I wasn't out there, and I wasn't part of the mission and getting the word out to many around me that I probably could have and should have.
So, Dr. Graves, before we pivot to COVID, I just want you to speak for a few minutes about Dr. Mykovitz, because if people do take our advice and go out and try to search around, they're going to run into a bunch of probably criticism of this woman. And I would just, you told me beforehand, you know her personally. Speak to her character, speak to who she is.
She is a woman of godly character, first of all. She loves the Lord. If you'll notice, she doesn't just wear that cross around her neck just for jewelry. She doesn't wear that just to be what I call a fashionable Christian. She believes it because it's what got her through the dilemma that she was faced with. And that was that she had truth and she tried to put it out, just as, and I'm going to go back to the Nazi Germany, because those scientists who disagreed at first, especially with the Nazi Germany mandate, that they tell the people that the Jewish people were not human and that they practiced such. They were faced with imprisonment, but most of the time they were shot and killed. And in all probability, I hate to say this, but that's probably what some of the individuals would like to do with Judy Mykovitz, if they possibly could get away with it. And we need to support her in every way, because everything that she has put out, every article that she has put out, the information that she has put out, she has validated with research and with other scientists across the globe, not just in a 5-mile radius. No, she has done this across the globe. And if we do not believe people like Judy, Dr. Mykovitz, then I'm sorry. We are going to truly be a lost nation and a forgotten nation as well, because we can't survive without truth. We cannot. Our democracy, our republic rather, not democracy, our republic is based upon a moral society, one that will actually revere truth. And that's who she is. And she did not succumb to the pressure, even imprisonment.
So Judy Mykovitz, you want to sometime soon do some Googling and go out there and inform yourself, educate yourself on what Dr. Mykovitz has to say, because it's very important, and it plays into, it feeds into what we're dealing with, Dr. Graves, this year with this pandemic, which is rooted in this COVID thing, which I'm not a doctor. And let me tell you, when this whole thing started, I was dealing with the death of my father at 85 years old. I think he may have died with it, because there was the symptom was fluid in the lungs, but he had a lot of cancer, a lot of things going on, a lot of comorbidities. So, and he died just a week or two before the lockdowns started early in the year. But my instinct told me, when it all started rolling like a snowball downhill, that it was all politics, or it was mostly politics. From the beginning, I believed there was a virus. It probably came from China and probably was in a lab. Maybe it was a weaponized kind of virus type thing. And I never doubted that it was in the wild and that it was a real thing. But right from the beginning, I doubted its capacity to do what was being suggested by the experts. And my sense was that it was more political than it was medical, than it was science. And I feel like that instinct that I had at the time has been borne out by the facts, because it seems to me that and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, you're the scientist, but the mortality rate, the death rate, has acted like a sort of bad flu, and the reaction of humanity the world over is perhaps better explained by herd immunity, so-called, whatever, by the idea that there's a God, I suppose, or that God put into our bodies this capacity to overcome something like this, even if it was made in a lab. And that's what we're seeing humanity's built-in processes sort of overcome it. And I feel like the distancing and the promise of a vaccine and the masking, my opinion, it's all, and the lockdown and the destruction of the economies of the world. There's a major disconnect there for me. Am I all wet on this? Are my instincts wrong here, Dr. Graves?
Your instincts are not wrong. There's only one thing that I would possibly disagree with you on, and that is this: that you mentioned that this virus would do all that those who wanted it to do. It's done a large majority of what they wanted it to do, but maybe it hasn't done enough to what they had expected it to do. Now, why do I say that? Because we know that at Fort Detrick in 2015, they were working on bat coronavirus. And it was being, I hate to say this, but it's probably was being looked at as a bioweapon. And that's a good possibility. Now, why? Because coronavirus is something that transmits very easily and quickly and generally through a population. Now, we have several different types of labs across this nation, and there are only a few selected labs that can handle such viruses. And the CDC is not one of them. They are in North Carolina and Vanderbilt, and of course in Boston and Fort Detrick. Those are some of those labs that can handle this. And we do know for a fact that it was some of the Chinese nationalists who were actually caught going across the border, not only in Canada, but also at the Logan Airport with vials of the virus in their socks. Now, that's not probably the first time that had happened. And why would I surmise that? Well, because they had put cameras, hidden cameras, into the lab. That is not something that is normally done. And so they, meaning probably the school or maybe even our FBI or CIA, I don't know, but they had probably suspected it, and that's why they put the cameras in the lab to see who it was, and that's how they knew who to pick up at the airport with the virus. Now, the virus probably was taken to Wuhan previously even. And so it was placed, the coronavirus, there's many different types of coronaviruses, but it does not cross-mutate with HIV virus. But yet, when we have sequenced the virus, we have found out that it is actually mutated with a glycoprotein 120, which is part of the HIV virus. And viruses don't crossbreed, so to speak. A cow and a pig don't breed. That's just the way it is. It's just plain simple science. But within their own different types, they had many different types of cows and pigs. There's many different types and colors and shapes and so on and so forth. However, this is something that appears to have been actually engineered in Wuhan, and probably the HIV component was placed in there. And as your listeners probably already know, that Fauci, Dr. Tony Fauci, actually was one who gave millions of dollars of NIH money to the Wuhan laboratories over there. And who knows, I don't have proof of it at all, but who knows if maybe that's not why, so that the HIV component could be placed into that particular strand of coronavirus. Therefore, maybe it hasn't done enough of what they wanted it to do, which would be kill even more individuals across the world.
Are you saying, Dr. Graves, that the virus may become more deadly over time?
We don't know that it might become more deadly. It might play out on itself because as it mutates, it may become actually weaker. However, there has been talk around the intelligence world that there would be a COVID-20 and a COVID-21, and that with the possibility of even Putin getting involved and placing a Russian version of COVID to the world, which would add a CD4 receptor. Now, what is that? Well, that's, again, part of the HIV virus. And you would add another component to what you already have, which would be the coronavirus and that of the HIV glycoprotein, 120. And that would be actually adding to that, wouldn't be taking anything away. And what that would do is knock out all of your immunity cells and your T cells. Now, I will tell you this. In the last few weeks, not only myself, but other physicians that I have been just talking with have seen actually more ill patients than we had seen previously. And they're not responding. Some of these patients are not responding nearly as quickly as we had months ago. It's taking more medication. It's taking different components of the medications to actually keep them out of the hospital and actually in some cases even keeping them alive. So we are seeing some concern. And like I said, it's not just in my patients, but it's in other physicians' patients around the country.
So, Dr. Graves, this is a good point to break and have some commercials here at the bottom of the hour. We're going to be on, folks, until the top of the hour with Dr. Karladine Graves. I know if you've been watching, you will stay tuned. I know you will stay tuned because we're talking to an honest person here who knows what she's talking about. And we're all concerned. When pollsters recently asked Americans what issues topped the list of concerns for them, COVID was at the top, and then the second issue was the economy, or it was vice versa. But those two issues, COVID and the economy, and they're linked actually, are at the top of people's list of concerns. So we're talking about not about the economy today, but we're talking with a highly qualified medical doctor about COVID. So stay tuned. We're going to be gone just for a minute or two, and then we'll be right back with more on COVID with Dr. Karladine Graves.
Have you been looking for a trusted long-term storable food company? We have a solution for you. Simply Clean Foods is dedicated to providing the best quality food you can buy next to fresh from a farmer's market. Our line of resealable fruits, vegetables, and meats are suitable for everyday use, and you won't have to worry about throwing away valuable groceries ever again. Our food is completely GMO-free, and our stringent quality controls, plus testing for heavy metals, makes us unique in the storable foods market. Simply Clean Foods' primary focus is to bring clean food to people all around the world and change the way we look at freeze-dried food in our daily cooking. When you purchase from simplycleanfoods.net, not only will you be receiving high-quality food, but you will also be supporting veterans in need across the country and those who are affected by natural disasters. Right now, Amazon Prime members will receive fast 2-day shipping. Go to simplycleanfoods.net. That's simplycleanfoods.net. But do it today.
At the McClario firm, it all starts with family. We are here to serve you and your family, online or in person. Call today for a free consultation. The McClario firm, your law firm for life.
Pornography is a destructive force. It destroys individuals, families, and fuels the out-of-control demand for sex trafficking. 45% of Christian families say porn is a problem in their home, but why aren't churches and public schools talking about this? Fear. People who view porn think they're the only one. It's a lie. Statistically, more people view porn than who do not and struggle in silence. www.lynnfrederick.com. You can find the book I wrote about my own battle with porn and the presentations that I do for churches and public schools. lynnfrederick.com.
All right, I'm going to shut up and let Dr. Graves do a lot of the talking during this 30 minutes because we need to hear what she has to say. I wish you could have been with us through the break as she was talking with me about how doctors are doctors of goodwill. And I believe most of them are people, scientists of goodwill, how they're processing what's. Go ahead, Dr. Graves. You tell us how is the medical community dealing with this?
Not well. I'll just be very open and honest with you. Not well at all. Because those that I am associated with, now those that follow the line of the AMA, of the FDA, I call them the 501c3 cohort.
You got that among doctors too. We got the same problem with churches, but anyway, you keep going.
Yeah, it's definitely among the medical field, and it's terrible because a lot of now I want you to understand something, and I want all you listeners to understand this. You will hear things quoted from the New England Journal of Medicine. You will hear things quoted from Lancet and other major articles that come out that have for years, many years. When I was in medical school, and of course I laugh and say when I was in medical school, we had to write our scripts on stone. It was so long ago. But when I was in medical school, we could count on those journals to be actual scientific journals that gave us the truth and gave us true data. However, I want you all to understand something and spread it as far and wide as you can, that these New England Journal of Medicine and Lancet and other journals, the editors of those journalists are paid thousands and thousands of dollars to put their articles in the journals. But they most of the time are sophisticated pharmaceutical ads. They have bought their way into that journal, and they have nefariously done a lot of data. And they have not given the truth like they used to. In fact, I have actually heard that some of these journal editors are paid well over $40,000 a year, almost $500,000 just by these pharmaceutical companies to get their information in their journals as science, when really it might not be. So unfortunately, we in the medical profession can't even trust our own journals many times because they are not even actually what we should know and need to know and could be beneficial for our patients. So it's left us kind of hanging out to dry, so to speak. And if you don't follow that, many times, if you're in a lawsuit and you are a physician, you count on that data to back up your case. But yet, if it's erroneous, it's put us in a very uncomfortable position. And we started researching, our group started researching, and I have a group of physicians that I'm a part of across this entire nation. And we have calls every other Monday evening. And we collaborate together and we share research. We share data together, one-on-one. And we begin to share this data way back in the latter part of December, the first part of January, because some of our physicians actually did hear what the ophthalmologist in China, who first tried to report the COVID, that it was there, that it was spreading. And by the way, he finally succumbed to COVID because they were testing him with the PCR, which did not turn positive until a week before he died. And they would not treat him until he turned positive. My own personal view is that they probably wanted him to die anyway because he had a lot of information. But nevertheless, he succumbed to the COVID. But when we saw this, we began to do research. And when we researched it, we found out that Dr. Fauci had done research on SARS-1, and also on MERS. And he had discovered that hydroxychloroquine was a wonderful, as he called it in his paper, a wonderful antiviral for coronavirus. But yet now, hear his story. Please listen to what he has to say. He basically added to making fun of Donald Trump, who actually announced the hydroxychloroquine. And I will put this in as well. Several doctors got together. We wrote a paper to Donald Trump, and someone very close to him, who unfortunately is now deceased, delivered it to him. And it was the very next day that President Trump came out and said that hydroxychloroquine could be a game changer because we showed him the data that we had researched. We showed him the results of what it could do to get the American economy back rolling, get the kids back in school, and get us back to community. But unfortunately, Trump said what he said about hydroxychloroquine being a possible game changer. Even Fauci actually disclaimed his view on the hydroxychloroquine, which is most unfortunate. And we have to remember they started with the remdesivir. They started pushing remdesivir. The remdesivir by itself has shown to be not beneficial. They did a study even in China on the remdesivir. And the remdesivir study in China showed that when done by itself, it did absolutely nothing. You have to put it with a protocol of other agents, medical agents, for it to actually work properly. In fact, now many of the scientists and physicians are saying that if you're sick enough for remdesivir, then you should probably have the convalescent plasma with it. And they need to be working synergistically together. Because by the time you go to the hospital, the virus has spread out entirely throughout your entire body. And it has done havoc to each cell in your body. And there's been inflammation that has occurred, both in the lungs, in the heart, the kidneys, probably even in the brain, causing the COVID headache that we hear so much about. And so it's pretty well done, a lot of its damage. What you're really treating in the hospital is more the damage that the COVID has done while you were at home waiting to get sicker to go back to be admitted to the hospital.
So Dr. Dr. Graves, say I've been healthy the whole time. Say I start to feel the symptoms and I decide that I'm not just dealing with the common cold or flu, but maybe I wonder that maybe this is COVID. What should I do?
Let's go back a little bit. I will answer that. And if I don't, you stop me. Let's go back just a little bit. Let's talk about what we could do prophylactically before you would get to that point. And I think that that is very important. You should be on vitamin D. Our group has discovered that if you have a vitamin D level between 50 and 75, you don't go on a ventilator because your immune system is able to better handle the virus. And so that would mean that you would have to take the vitamin D and then get a level if you're not already on vitamin D, or if you are on vitamin D, then get a blood level. And don't let them fool you and tell you that 30 is fine. It's not. 40 is not fine. It has to be 50 to 75.
And this would be everybody.
Everybody. And I was so angry with Tony Fauci when Tony Fauci said, they asked him specifically, what can those who have darker skin, like the blacks, what can they do? And he said, well, I guess they'll just have to social distance and quarantine. And then months later, he comes back out and tells everybody he personally is taking D, vitamin D, and C. But did he tell the black populace that, or those who have the pigmented skin? No, he didn't tell them that. He didn't even offer that to them. Now, why is that important? Because they have a natural sunscreen, and most of the black populace and those of Middle East populace who especially live up north, they're already vitamin D deficient. And so they're going into this already probably below. In fact, most of the black populace that I have treated in the past have been maybe a level of 9, or I've even had as low as 5 for their vitamin D level. And you can imagine how we have to build them up. And so they must have that vitamin D, and they must have that level. And then with vitamin C, you need about 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C. Oh, and by the way, that's D3. Don't get D2, get D3. And the vitamin C, you need at least 1,000 milligrams, if not 1,000, 2 times a day. Now, the experts say you should be taking 500 milligrams of vitamin D every 6 hours. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm doing good to take it 2 times a day. And so I'm just going to count on the good Lord handling that one, because I can take 1,000 2 times a day. I can remember that. But I get busy during the day, and I can't take 500 4 times a day. Doesn't work for me. And the zinc, you need zinc. We have some ionoform zincs that you can get online. Zincs are being pulled off of the counter right now. And we were told that actually the government has been pulling some of the zinc off. I can't prove that. I don't know that. But nevertheless, zinc is harder to find now than it ever has been. But you'll need, I give 25 milligrams a day. Now, other people, they go down to 11. Some go to 11, some go to 50. There's a wide range. So I use 25. It seems to work. But if you take the zinc every day, you're going to need something that you might not have in your box, in your toolbox, and that is copper. You need 2 milligrams of copper every day if you're going to be taking the zinc every day. And you need magnesium. You need at least 400 milligrams of magnesium. Now, you are also going to need some very unusual things if you feel like that you're getting sick. And these are kind of strange things. One of them is quercetin, And you can get that anytime off of the internet, or you can go to a health food store and get it. Now, if you are not sick, it would be 500 milligrams 2 times a day. But if you're feeling a little bit sick and you've got a sore throat and you're just kind of feeling a little bit tired more than usual, so on and so forth, you can up that to 500 4 times a day, or maybe you want, like me, take 1,000 milligrams 2 times a day. And then one other very important thing, a couple of other things I guess I'm thinking of, is vitamin A. Vitamin A is very important for the lung tissue. And in fact, we have an IgA, and that's an immunoglobulin. And vitamin A helps with that immunoglobulin, and it has to do with all respiratory illnesses. And so you need to be on about 6,000 micrograms a day, and that's mcg a day. Now, if you're sick, what I give my patients is 18,000 mg a day, doing the acute phase, and then I gradually move them down with time. And there's one other thing you really need to look at, and that is what we call NAC. What in the world is NAC? Well, it's N, and then it is acetylcysteine. Very, very important for the lungs. And you need to be on about 600 milligrams a day. If you're not feeling well, 600 milligrams up to 2 times a day, or follow the instructions of the bottle that you buy. And that too is now becoming difficult to find on the shelves because it's an essential in fighting the COVID. Now, this is protection. Some people use also a solution, an iodine solution called Lugol's solution, and it's a 2%. And you can buy that again online, and you put 1 drop of it in 2 to 3 ounces of water, and you drink it. It tastes horrible, I will just tell you. So you build that up. Every day you add a drop until you get to 6 drops. It could affect people who have thyroid issues. And so what I do is I ask them that in 4 to 6 weeks, they get their thyroid levels checked with their vitamin D check at the same time. That would be the best thing to do. Now, that's a lot for your viewers.
Mm-hmm.
An awful lot.
I'm glad it's on video. They can always go back and watch it as many times as they need to.
Well, that's good, because they probably will need to. And you might want to slow the video down. And now that you have the COVID, okay? And I will answer that question for you, Mike. So you think you have COVID. You have a sore throat, you have a fever, you have a headache, and a little cough starting. Okay, so what do? Well, I'm not suggesting the PCR. The PCR test is one of the most erroneous tests that we have ever relied on in the history of this country. The PCR was actually discovered by Dr. Mullis, who won the Nobel Prize. And unfortunately, he died last fall. And he died of a very mysterious respiratory pneumonia. We have no idea, but he died. But what he said was this. He said, never use the PCR as a diagnostic tool. It is only a research tool. And that is in his writings. Yet this is what we have done. And they run it through many cycles. They run it through different cycles where they take that and put it in solutions, and they run it through cycles, what they have collected up your nose. And even if you had a common cold, you can turn positive. And in many states, that gives a tracker the ability to track you down and to keep tabs on you in many states of this nation. And that's not what America is about. We don't do that with the flu. We certainly didn't do that with the swine flu or any other epidemics that we have had. None. This is the first one. And so it could be that you had a very erroneous or a false positive. In fact, we think that false positives are 30 to 40%, and so are false negatives. And you have to have the virus, at least we estimate, a good 10 to 16 days before you would turn positive on a PCR. And that's if they got a good PCR. But nevertheless, the PCR they are more for a DNA type of infection, whereas this is an RNA infection. We have an erroneous study for an erroneous virus. And therefore, the whole thing I call nefarious. But nevertheless, so what I would suggest you do is to get a immunoglobulin test, an IgM and an IgG test. Now, is that perfect? No, it is not. But an IgM, if you test IgM, then you are definitely in the early state of COVID. If you have an IgM and an IgG that turn positive, then your body is starting to fight back.
Is that a blood test, doctor?
It is a blood test. Now, I will tell you, I am not plugging a certain company, but we do have a brand new test out made by BioHitch, B-I-O-H-I, Hitch. And it is, or BioHit, I know it's BioHit, excuse me, BioHit, not Hitch, Hit, BioHit. And BioHit has developed this, and the FDA has given it an emergency usage by physicians and pharmacies. In fact, I just had my first pharmacist that is going to start using it in their pharmacy just yesterday. It's a very mild finger prick, and you put the blood in a little well. I mean, you don't even feel it. Seriously, you don't. And you put it in a little well, and then you put the reagent on it, and within 15 minutes, about they say 10 to 20 minutes, but most of them come about 15 minutes. You'll know if you have IgM, IgG, and IgM, or if you just have IgG, which would show that your body is pretty well clearing it, and you're going to get through this, and you have built up an immunity to the virus. So that is what that's what they are. I would like to see everybody use, because we could be using this in the hospital. We could be using this in schools and colleges. We wouldn't have to wait for 3 or 4 days. While people are waiting, in fact, I had a patient yesterday over on the Kansas side who had been waiting for 3 or 4 days. And in the meantime, they were, unfortunately, they were getting worse. And so, but if they had had this little finger test, we would have known and been able to move very quickly.
Jared, the last link in my notes there, just go ahead and get that ready. We're within 5 minutes of the top of the hour, and the past 20 minutes are 20 minutes that you're going to want, if you have any concern about COVID, if you're afraid, then you're going to want to go back and listen to that a few times. And like Dr. Graves said, you're probably going to want to slow it down, write some things down, and you're going to want to start. You called it prophylactic. So
prophylactic. Yeah, it's PROPHYLATIC, prophylactic, or preventative. I do have a website if people would like to go to that website. And Personal Healthcare Network.us, and I did put out, and I was hoping
Jared, throw that up if you want. Go ahead.
I was hoping that many people would sign the petition. Not very many people have signed it, unfortunately, for the right to try hydroxychloroquine. Because my thinking was this, that if President Trump worked something out with his physician, and others have worked out with their physician who seem to be more in the bureaucratic realm, that they can use the hydroxychloroquine, then I think that every American citizen should have that right. If they have a loved one or if they themselves are coming down with it. I've treated my own family with it. I mean, I have treated them because our 12-year-old grandson came down very sick with COVID very quickly. And two of his friends, a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old, had ended up on a ventilator in Washington, D.C. And so I really, so we treated him immediately. And within days, he was totally clear of all antibodies, which that's what you want. That shows that he was actually, he had it, it was positive, and then he tested negative, and he was completely well within just a matter of days, whereas his friends did not have that. The 14-year-old and the 16-year-old, and unfortunately, they were in the hospital for over a month and had to have tracheotomies.
Well, my goodness, the time has flown, and we've been handling heavy subjects here. Dr. Graves, thank you so much for your compassion and for your experience and for being willing to share that so freely with us on this program today. But I don't want to end on this heavy note, so I have a little video here that we're going to watch and laugh at. Not that one. It's the one at the bottom of my notes. An honest ad from the Democrats. An honest ad from the Democrats. There we go. So we're going to watch a little bit of this as we move toward the end of the show and just get a chuckle. So this was put out by Glenn Beck's Blaze, and I saw it earlier today, and I said, I got to end the show with this. So go ahead, Jared.
Hi, I'm the spokesperson for the Democratic Party, and I'm back to tell you why you need to vote blue this November. You know us as the party of love, tolerance, and compassion, but we're much more than that. We're the party of science, and the science is clear. Men have periods, babies are clumps of cells until they're born, and maybe a few minutes after. Vaccines save lives unless they're developed while Trump is president, and voting for us will end hurricanes, wildfires, and tornadoes. As our nation reels from a pandemic with at least a 98% survival rate, we need a party that understands that riots, liquor stores, and abortion clinics are immune to the virus, while churches and schools are dangerous and must be shut down. It's for your safety. Democrats stand for justice. That means we'll ruin a man's life based on no evidence because we believe all women, unless your name is Tara Reid. As fighters for justice, we have a winning message from our activist base. Abolish the police and prison systems. At the same time, we'll push to take away your guns and eliminate single-family housing zones. It'll be fine. Our commitment to justice also means we'll stand by as the lives, businesses, and property of people who did nothing wrong are destroyed. That's because we believe Black Lives Matter. Trump is a racist. He just is. And even though he's explicitly condemned white supremacy multiple times, it's not enough and it never will be. Come to think of it, he hasn't been quite clear enough on his stances on cannibalism, pushing people in front of moving trains, or Ted Bundy either. It really makes you wonder. In Joe Biden, we have a champion for the BIPOC.
All right, we've run out of time, but we're going to be back next week with a really great show. I don't know how we're going to top this show. Dr. Graves, thank you so much for your time. This has been so informative and so helpful, and we wish you the very best in your work, as I know that you're even now treating COVID patients.
Well, I'm appreciative. Don't anybody ask me to treat you, though, because I'm under investigation in the state of Missouri for writing for hydroxychloroquine. And And I had another doctor turn me in that said that I was writing for a non-FDA approved medication. And so don't anybody contact me right now.
We can go to your website and
Yes, go to my website. Definitely go to our website. It's not mine, it's our website. Because I give God the glory, first of all.
And there must be doctors similar to you who aren't under investigation who people can find, I would assume.
Yes, and I will certainly help them. If they want to contact me, I will get them. I will get them care. Don't worry. We will get you fixed up.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. And you've been watching WCN-TV live, and we'll be back next week. I believe it's Rob will be back next week with his name went right out of my brain. But he'll be back. Rob will be back next week with a great guest. And thanks so much for tuning in. Have a great rest of the day.